All right, so we are recording. We're good to go. Let's get started. So today we are going to navigate the grocery store. We're going to talk about the best preparation for grocery shopping. We're going to talk about how, what you find in each of the aisles, how to navigate some of the pitfalls. We'll do a little virtual tour, and then we'll kind of look at the food label and dissect that a little bit, so that you can be a really educated, smart shopper when you're at the grocery store and really know what you're looking for, okay? So let's see, I'm gonna make sure I click on this. There we go. So how many times has this happened? You went grocery shopping on an empty stomach and made lots of bad choices at the grocery store. Of course it's happened. We've all made that mistake, right? So the most important thing you can do before going to the grocery store is plan ahead. Take a little bit of time before you ever leave your house to do some meal planning, figure out what you're going to cook for the following week, make a shopping list, and make sure that you take that list with you to the store. That list doesn't do any good if it's sitting on your dining room table while you're at the store. And don't shop on an empty stomach. When you go to the grocery store while you're hungry, all of those displays of cookies and brownies and chips and soda and sugary cereals, they look a lot more tempting when you're hungry than if you go after a meal, after you've eaten something. And we're going to touch on this a little bit more later. We want you to fill your cart with a lot of color, and read those food labels, which we mentioned we're going to get into towards the end. So let's take a little tour of the grocery store, shall we? Every grocery store is designed a little bit differently, but for the most part, this is what you're going to see. You're along the perimeter, you're going to see your produce, so all of your fruits and vegetables, the bakery, the meat section, your eggs, dairy, cheese, frozen foods, and then you swing back around to the front where the checkout registers are. And then in the middle, all those center aisles, you have some very processed foods, some canned items, baking items, and paper products and cleaning supplies and that kind of stuff, okay? So let's start at the perimeter. When you walk into that grocery store, either to the right or to the left, depending on the design, you're going to hit the produce section, okay, with all of those fruits and vegetables. And this is where we want you to shop by color. The more color in your diet, the more variety, the better, because they all bring something different to the table, something beneficial. They all have different vitamins and minerals and antioxidants. That's what those colors represent. For example, bananas are really high in potassium. Your orange fleshy fruits and vegetables are going to be higher in vitamin A. Those dark leafy greens give you a lot of folate. We want all of that in your diet, okay? And it also helps to try to shop what's in season, because a lot of times grocery shopping can be really expensive. And so if you are able to shop in season, or at different local farmers markets where they only have seasonal produce, those prices tend to be better. You get fresher, better tasting product because it's in the height of its season, and it tends to be a little bit cheaper. So just for you to take a peek, Florida, and I know, there are different parts of Florida that can vary as far as season and the temperature, but in general, this is freshfromflorida.com, a seasonal map. We're coming into some more seasonal produce. You can see over the summer, in those really, really hot summer months, July, August, and even into September, there is a lot less that's in season. It's really hard to maintain produce in these very extreme temperatures. But you still have some things available that you can shop seasonally. And then again, I go to the farmer's market or the Publix sales or Sprouts, whatever grocery stores you have locally to you. But that's just an idea. You can go to their website. They have a lot more information on the website. So moving on past the produce section, we see lots and lots of choices for bread. I've never seen so many options for bread. It can be very intimidating. So a lot of people try to eat less bread in general, whether they're watching calories or carbs or for whatever reason. But ultimately, when you are buying bread, the best option is going to be something whole grain or 100% whole wheat. I like the bread with the seeds in it. It gives it some texture, some nuttiness. I like the flavor of it better, but you don't have to get the seeds. You can just get the 100% whole wheat bread. If you're not used to whole wheat, if you've been eating a lot of just regular refined white bread, a nice transitional bread would be like an oatmeal bread. There's a little bit of texture to it. They've got the oats on the crust, but it's not super heavy. It doesn't go fully into that whole wheat realm, if you will. So if you're not used to it, maybe try some oatmeal bread and then maybe start working your way into those whole grain options, okay? They have more vitamins. They generally have more protein, more fiber. Overall, it's a healthier product. Moving on to the meat case. Again, a lot of variety. Ultimately, more poultry and seafood in your diet is better for you, but that does not mean that you can never have red meat. But some things to watch out for to make better, healthier choices. When you're buying poultry, ideally you want to choose skinless options. The skin tends to be where all the fat is, okay? So if you're buying chicken or turkey with the skin on, then ideally you would come home and trim all of that skin and fat off before you cook it. If you cook it with all of that on and then take the skin off afterwards, the chicken has already absorbed all of that fat. You're kind of defeating the purpose. So we really want that skin and fat trimmed before you cook. And then just something to be aware of, especially for people who need to be on low sodium diets for specific health issues. Sometimes the chicken breasts are injected with a brine or a salt solution. Like chicken broth. You can see in the picture on the PowerPoint here, boneless, skinless chicken breasts contains up to 15% natural chicken broth. They do that to make the chicken breast, to make the piece of meat look plumper and juicier and more appealing. So that's not necessarily a deterrent for you to buy it, but again, it's just something for you to be aware of, that there is some hidden sodium in your foods potentially. And it has to be labeled, so you can just look for it on the label to make sure that you know what you're buying, okay? Fish and shellfish, seafood, generally speaking, it is a fantastic, lean, low-fat protein option. Some of the fattier fish like salmon are going to give you those nice omega-3 heart healthy benefits. We're not going to get into in this session farm raised versus wild caught. Nutritionally, they are very similar. And the environmental aspects, that's a whole other can of worms, so to speak, that we're not going to get into today. But by all means, fish and shellfish are great options for a lean protein source. And then as far as red meat, you can see in the other picture, there are lots of different options for red meat. Some have a lot more white marbling going through them, and that white marbling is fat. Now, the upside to getting a cut of meat with some of that marbling is that the fat is supposed to add some juiciness, some flavor. The downside is that it's a lot of saturated fat that is not so good for your heart. So when you're making those choices on cuts of meat, ideally you want to choose something that has less marbling, less fat running through it. And when you want to trim off the fat as much as possible. Same with ground beef. You see those percentages on the packages. So you can get something that's 85% lean. I've seen packages that are 90-10. So that's 90% lean, 10% fat. You can get them as high as 99% lean. Here's the difference. That little bit of fat does, we said, it adds a little bit of flavor and a little bit of moistness, juiciness to your product. So it depends on what you're using the product for. If you're buying that ground meat to make a hamburger at home on the grill, you want a little bit of fat. So maybe you choose a 90-10 or even an 85, okay? So that you have that little bit, but you don't go overboard. Otherwise you just have a really dry hamburger at the end of it. But if you're using that ground meat for a casserole or in a soup or a stew where there's a lot of other moisture, there's a lot of other flavors boosting that meat, you don't need the extra fat. Get the 99% lean or a 93% lean, because those other flavors, those other ingredients that are going into your dish are going to support it so that you don't need the extra fat, okay? I usually have a couple of different varieties in my freezer so that I have options. And then meat substitutes are growing in popularity. So the Impossible Burger, the Beyond Burger, you have the other brands that have been around a little bit longer. I think Morningstar is one of them for like vegan sausage patties or vegan bacon or something like that. When you look at a comparison of nutrients, protein, if we look at the meat substitutes versus an actual beef hamburger versus a turkey burger, a black bean burger, they're all very, very similar in protein content. Minus the turkey burger, they're all very similar in calories. They're all very similar in fat. Where it starts to get a lot different is sodium. So those meat substitutes are very processed. There are a lot of ingredients in there to try to get them to taste like meat without being meat. And so they are incredibly high in sodium compared to a regular hamburger or turkey burger. And then the turkey burger is actually lower in calories. It's lower in fat. And still being about the same amount of protein when compared with everything else. So the turkey burger may actually be the best way to go. And now if you're trying to be vegetarian or vegan and stay away from all those meat products, I totally understand. And so then the moral of the story is, don't eat these highly processed meat substitutes on a regular basis, okay? Because they are so high in sodium. So use them as a treat, and then rely on beans, tofu, tempeh for your protein sources, okay? Milk, again, I feel like I'm on repeat every time we talk about a different food. There are so many choices. There's so much variety now. You can't just go and buy milk. So you have milk, cow's milk, and within that, you have whole, skim, 2%, 1%, and then you have all your milk substitutes. So you've got soy milk, oat milk, almond milk, coconut milk, cashew milk, right? Ideally, you're choosing a low-fat option. whatever it is, okay? There is a lot of research that shows health benefits to low-fat dairy. So skim or 1% milk, fat-free or low-fat yogurt. And then your milk alternatives, my only concern with those, and what I tell my clients, is that they tend to be lower in protein. They're fortified with your calcium, your vitamin D, so you're going to get from them what you would get from cow's milk, except the protein. So as long as you are getting protein from other sources like poultry, fish, legumes, nuts, then it's not a problem. It's fine. There is an option for low-fat cheese. Your choice. My personal opinion, my personal preference, I don't care for the taste of low-fat cheese, but I know that regular cheese in large amounts is not good for me. And so I choose regular cheese in smaller amounts, like a condiment, okay? But certainly if you don't mind the taste of low-fat cheese, that is an option also. Eggs, are they good? Are they bad? I feel like it changes week to week. And that just goes to show how hard it is to do nutrition research, and how we are constantly evolving as a science and learning new things as technology gets better and our research methods get better. And I know it's frustrating that the information seems to change sometimes, but that's because we're learning new things all the time. And so there's a lot of debate about eggs and how much cholesterol in food affects your blood cholesterol levels. Eggs have a lot of benefits to them. The egg whites are packed full of protein. The egg yolks, even though they are a source of cholesterol, the egg yolks are also a source of fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin D and vitamin E. So they're not all bad either. I would say that if you're eating 3 or 4 eggs every single day, that's probably too much. But having eggs in your diet is probably a good thing in moderation. It provides a lot of benefits for you. Oh, and one more thing about the eggs. Again, we go back to a lot of options, a lot of variety. There's conventional, there's free range, there's all natural, there's organic, and they all come with different price points, okay? So if you are looking for a standard of how the chickens are raised, their food, what they're fed, organic, USDA organic is the only one of those labels that has a required set of standards they have to meet in order to be certified organic. The others, there's no defined set of guidelines for those labels. And so you don't necessarily know what you're getting, okay? So if you want, you know, the ones that have guidelines, you're looking for the organic. Otherwise, in my opinion, you could probably just go conventional, okay? The color of the egg does not matter. White egg, brown egg, there's no nutrient difference. All right, so the frozen section. Frozen vegetables, frozen fruit, I keep them in my freezer for convenience all the time. I keep corn, cauliflower, rice, spinach, so that I have a backup. So if I haven't gone grocery shopping, I can pull vegetables out of the freezer. I also make smoothies, protein smoothies for myself. And so I keep some different varieties of fruit in the freezer so that I can make those smoothies. The trick is you don't want to buy them with sauces and things added to them. So if you're going to buy those frozen vegetables, especially, you want them plain as is, just the vegetables, and with no added sauces or sodium. Frozen dinners and frozen desserts are a whole other bag, right? So the problem with frozen dinners is that you could be looking at calories and total fat. Maybe you're looking at calories and fat and trying to keep those numbers low so that you don't go off the rails. Calorie free, well, nothing's calorie free, but let's say it's fat free. Guess what else is probably in there to make it taste good? Salt. Lots and lots of sodium, okay? So a lot of times you're gonna have one and the other, or the other. It's either gonna be lower in sodium and higher in fat, or lower in fat and higher in sodium. And so again, we're gonna talk about the labels in a moment, but just be aware when you're looking at frozen dinners, and I have some in my freezer too, as a convenience, as a backup, but try to make um, smart choices, right? When you're looking at those labels. Frozen desserts, you know, if you got to have dessert, you got to have dessert. I would rather you have a small portion. And personally, I really like the whole fruit frozen bars, like the Dole fruit bars, versus some elaborate high calorie, high fat, high sugar dessert option. Okay. So if I have frozen dessert, that's probably what it's going to be, are those whole fruit bars. Let's talk about the middle aisles. So again, you run into a lot of very processed, high calorie items in those middle aisles. A lot of boxed, pre-packaged mixes that tend to be high in sodium also. But the middle aisles are not to be avoided completely. They actually provide some really important ingredients for your cooking. So the exceptions to the processed high sodium stuff are going to be your dried legumes, dried beans and peas and lentils. Canned goods that can be super convenient, canned fruits, canned vegetables, canned soups. Just remember when you're in that aisle, when you're looking at canned fruits, you want to try to get them either in water or in their own juices instead of the syrup. And when you're looking at canned vegetables and canned soups, you're looking for low sodium or no added sodium. If you can't get that, let's say you get canned green beans or canned pinto beans, and you can't find the low sodium, when you open that can, you're going to want to drain them and rinse them really well. That's not going to eliminate the sodium, but it will substantially decrease the amount of sodium. You get your cooking oils in those middle aisles, your herbs and spices from the baking aisle to flavor your food, whole grain cereals, your oatmeal or your steel cut oats. I like the old fashioned oats or the steel cut. They have a nice texture to them. So you get some really important things from those middle aisles, okay? You just have to be discerning, which is why we're gonna look at this food label. So the very first thing, the most important thing is that you look at that serving size. A can of soup is my favorite example. If I open a can of soup, I'm eating the whole can. In my mind, that is one serving. But if you look at the food label, that can of soup technically is 2 servings. And so everything you look at on the label after that is based on half a can of soup. Okay, so if the calories on the can say 250 and you eat the whole can, that's 500 calories, not 250. All right, so it's really important to know what the serving size is. Cereals are notorious for being all over the map with serving sizes. There's no standardization. It's totally up to the food manufacturer of what serving size they put on the label. All right, so just be wary of that. And then you go to the calories. You want to try to limit the fat, the cholesterol, the sodium. Ideally, we want more fiber, protein, those vitamins, okay, vitamin A, calcium, iron, even vitamin C, although if you're eating a lot of fruits and vegetables, you're probably getting plenty of vitamin C. So generally speaking, 5% or less is considered low. 20% or more is considered high. When you're looking at sodium, a good rule of thumb for a meal, so not a snack food, but a meal food, a serving ideally would be 500 milligrams or less of sodium. That's considered pretty good for a meal. If you eat 3 meals a day at 500 milligrams, that keeps you well below the guidelines of 2,300 milligrams a day. Okay, and it gives you a little room for snacks in between. And of course, always we want to limit sugar. It's okay to have it in moderation, but we don't want it in excess. So we don't want that sugar number to be really high either. So like we said at the beginning, I make a list. Sometimes I even bring it with me. In this day and age of technology, I keep my grocery list on my phone so that when I go to the store, it's there. One of our other dietitians that I work with mentioned an app called Whisk, where you can actually do some meal planning and look at recipes and then create a grocery list from that. So I'm going to check that out for myself. That might be an option for you. But yeah, that brings us to the end of the grocery store tour. Are there any questions that I can answer at this point? I've got my Q&A box open, my chat box open. So if you are wondering about anything, I can answer that now. Okay. All right. Well, I either did such a great job explaining or, or I put you all to sleep. So either way, thank you so much. I haven't decided what the topic is for next time, but stay tuned. And thank you again. I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting.